Okay. Hello, I read books and I'm here to talk about another one. Today I'm going to be talking about The Book Thief. You probably know The Book Thief. It's a very popular book, and I read it for an English class, and I'm very happy about this book. I'm very excited. With The Book Thief, this was the first book I actually properly annotated, and very much enjoyed it. It enhanced the reading process, journey, I don't know. The Book Thief is a story of a young girl named Liesel growing up in Germany during World War II. Liesel was sent to live with Hans and Rosa, who are her foster parents in the story. One of the key things off the bat is that this book is narrated by death, and that's already such an interesting idea, but it really makes sense with the story going on and the time that it's set in. So the story is narrated by death. The whole book, throughout the entire book, it has a poetic writing style to it. It's very poetic, and there's a lot of beautiful language in it, which was very nice to read. Sometimes it took a second for it to sink in or to properly understand, but honestly, it was just really fun to read. Something I really loved about this book were the complex character relationships. I didn't know I really liked character relationships, but I do. With this book, Liesel, her relationships with everyone else in the book, even more side characters to more main characters, all of her relationships are unique and they have their own quirks, and she acts differently with them all, and it beautifully blends in with each other. The relationship between Liesel, Rudy, who is her best friend, Rosa, her foster mom, Hans, her foster father, and Max, the Jew that they hide in their basement. Those are the relationships I'm mainly going to be talking about in this video. So, starting off with Liesel and Rudy. Rudy loves her immediately and is pretty bold. He is a funny, sarcastic kid. He isn't very patriotic from what I've seen in the book. He and Liesel at one point steal apples and potatoes and other things like that. So there's a lot of these small moments with them that really help us get a sense of what their friendship is like. And there's parts in the book that tell us how Rudy is as a character in himself, like the Jesse Owens incident. And Liesel and Rosa. So Rosa is a stern woman who curses quite a bit in the book. It may be hard to see it at first, but Rosa cares very deeply for Liesel. She is, in my opinion, the funniest character in the book. Her conversations with Hans are one of my favorites. Rosa is a very confident person, so when she was shaken when they were in the basement because of a bombing, it really meant that it was stressful and scary for her, and, just something like that detail was important. I also want to talk about Liesel and Hans. Their relationship from the beginning is amazing. Hans, you can tell that he's a kind father to Liesel, and he's the one who taught her to read despite not being able to read very well himself. And that whole beginning of the book where they were bonding, that really set a lot of groundwork for the entire book, and it was really nice. It was very sweet. In the book, when he and Liesel were reading, it showed how Liesel began to trust him more, because in the beginning of the book, obviously she's with new people, in a new place, she didn't know how to read or write. It was very new for her, and it was quite scary. Her brother had just died in the beginning of the book, so the whole beginning of the book was very important, obviously. So when there was bonding between her and Hans, it was immediate that he was someone that she could trust. And throughout the beginning, when she would show by little acts and little things throughout the book and chapters, that you saw that she slowly began opening up to him and trusting him and considering him her father. It was very sweet. As the book progressed, their bond just got so much stronger, and it was really nice to see. And now I'm going to talk about Liesel and Max. So their relationship was my favorite by far in the whole book. Early on, we knew that Liesel's brother had died, which was already traumatic for her. And the contrast of how society in Germany would see Max, a Jew, versus Max and Liesel's wholesome friendship just made their bond sweeter just to see. And Max and Liesel had a lot of moments where the talking was very minimal, but you could tell that their friendship was growing because of small acts they did for each other. Like when Liesel would bring Max the newspaper with the crosswords still blank, and giving him a weather report because he couldn't go out and see the weather for himself. Or when Max would give her small books which were Mein Kampf that he painted over, things like that that were very sweet. And also the whole idea of books inside of this book, it just made it all more real to see the kind of gifts that he gave her. It was just a whole new experience to have and to be able to read those. And the final relationship, which is Lysol and words, which obviously words are the most important thing in this book. They are important in everyday life too. They're important everywhere, I think. Like I said in the beginning, she was illiterate. She couldn't read or write, and that caused her to even beat up a kid, get teased at school, things like that. But after she learned to read, it was a slow journey, but she did. She grew more confident. She ended up using her words for good, and she learned the meaning of. And also, you could see that words could also be hateful. When they were in the basement and she was reading and everyone was scared, she used her words and her ability to read to the people and to try to calm them down, which she did. And things like that just showed the power of words. Also, when her father, Hans, told her to keep reading. Also, a side note is her and Isa, I believe her name is, the mayor's wife. She was more of a side character, I'd say. Very important, obviously, but just more of a side character. But she was complex, too. That's why I don't really want to call her a side character, because even side characters were complex with their own stories and their own kind of relationship with Lysol, which were amazing in the book. So words were so important, so impactful for Lysol that when the mayor's wife gave her a book of her own to write down her own story, words ended up saving her life when she was in her basement writing her own story when a bomb hit. Words were throughout the entire book, obviously. I mean, it's a book, there's words everywhere, but the impact and meaning of words were always in the book and always present, which I loved. And it also was just enhanced by the writing style itself. Like I said, it's so poetic and it's so deep. So the whole vibe of the entire book was just amazing. And I loved reading it. Also, I really like how... Also, I'm glad that I read it with a class, because that just meant that it was more stretched out. I really got to have the book, like I let each chapter sink in before, reading the next chapter. And I'm also glad that I annotated the book, because it just helped me remember, and it just really helped with reading and understanding things. So, yeah. I tried to make a color system with it. I didn't follow it perfectly, but I tried. And honestly, it was just really fun reading it. There's so many characters, because even their neighbor's son, he wasn't in the book that much, but he was there enough for us to understand, his struggles. And the neighbor, she had struggles after her son died. She was shaken up after she was in the basement. She kept asking Lysol to keep reading to her because she was shaken up. Just even side characters, neighbors, they had enough characterization where we understood their struggles, we understood where they were coming from, and we understood who they were. Honestly, that was amazing. All of the characters I felt were very complex. Also, the narrator, Death. He would make little notes to the reader and do a lot of foreshadowing. I think it was well written. As a narrator, I have never really read a book with a narrator like that. Not only was he deaf, but also just his voice himself. I think that was amazing. So overall, as you can tell, I loved this book. I highly recommend it. I think annotating it was very fun, so if you do read it, I recommend maybe annotating it, or at least just taking notes on the side of it. There's many different ways you can do it. So yeah, I definitely get the praise for this book, and I highly recommend it. If you've read this book, let me know your thoughts on it, good or bad. I just would like to know. And yeah, I will see you next time.